All right. So the first part of our training is the fundamentals, which is security, compliance, and identity fundamentals. So here, what we try to do is to look at the core principles, right, for organization protection as well as governance. Now, if you notice, it's very long: security, compliance, and identity. So we are talking about three different things: security, compliance, and identity. So the fundamental part of it. So for here, these are our agenda. These are the things we'll be covering. We want to look at core security and compliance concepts. We'll talk about share responsibility models in cloud and also for on-premises environments. We'll talk about defense in-depth and as well as the CIA triage, then zero trust security model. We'll talk about encryption, action. These are just fundamental something just for you to have an idea of what all these things are. They are more or less like definitions. Then we'll talk about governance, risk, compliance. Then we'll now look into the identity concepts, security perimeters, and also the modern identity services, as well as the federations. Now, for this, want to look at introduction to security compliance itself, right? So the goal is to basically look at everything we've talked about in our discussion. So now, if you are to describe security, compliance, and can anyone help us? What does security means? What does compliance means? What does security means? So maybe everybody needs to drop their hand for now. Then if you have anyone that wants to answer, I can unmute the person. Emmanuel, can you help just unmute everybody since the class has started now? I think people should not just unmute themselves. The reason why we have to meet everybody was to have that. If you can help unmute everybody. If you have anyone that wants to answer, okay, I think Bashir, you want to answer what security compliance is? Yeah, anyone? So
okay, hello. Security basically has to do with protecting your devices, what you have. Then compliance basically means adhering to some guidelines and principles within an environment.
all right, thank you so much, Greg.
Hello?
Yeah, James, you want to ask?
Hello, Emmanuel. Hello.
Hi, James, are you talking to us here?
No,
Hello?
Bashir. I don't know if you can hear me.
Please, you don't unmute your mics at random. Let us call you, then we can. So we don't make it rowdy. Please.
Please let me know if I'm on.
Ololade.
Is Bashir on?
Security
Who is that
is a way
somebody
of
saying
defense.
he's Rashid?
Mane, I need to help meet this everybody again. I don't like the rowdiness.
Which electric? Hey, I remember. By 3 o'clock, they're still making noise.
Thank you. I think I'll just go through the presentation then because it's becoming rowdy. Yeah, so thank you very much, Greg, for that. So basically, what happened with security generally is that as organizations, businesses, they move their data, people trying to access data from location outside the normal traditional corporate network. Now, before now, what happened is that most organizations before cloud came, most organizations have their on-prem data center, and in the on-prem data center, what happened is that people were able to access data within the on-prem data center. But now cloud came in, and people still need to access these informations. We call them business data, right? So organizations need to understand how they can best, protect their data. So with security now, we're looking at how organizations are able to, protecting those data. regardless of where they are accessing the data from. So whether they are accessing it, from the corporate network or they are accessing the data from the cloud, right? Organizations need to know how to protect those data. And that is what security is speaking to. So whether the data is sitting within their network or is sitting with a cloud service provider, they need to find a way to basically access data. Now, for compliance, organizations also need to ensure that they are compliant with industry and regulatory requirements. So depending on the industry they are, maybe they're in the finance industry, maybe the fintech, the banking, right? Or they're in the healthcare industry. So every industry has their regulations that each of these organizations need to actually comply to. And the goal is to actually ensure that the data are protected and there's privacy of data. So those are the things that we want to basically look at in our discussion today on security, compliance, and identity. We want to see what are the various ways that organization can actually secure the data, and what are the various things that they need to consider. Is there like a governance framework that organization need to use if they need to be compliant either with their industry or with their regulators? Now, let's go on. So what are the importance of security and compliance in modern days? Now, it is very important that today, wherever your users are, maybe your employee, your partner, or your suppliers, right, that have access to your company's data, right, there is need for data access and protection, meaning that they should be able to access your organization data, and those data they are accessing must actually be protected. So organization must actually find a way to safeguard data access within corporate network and also the cloud environment. And the purpose is to ensure that there is no breaches, because the moment there is a data breach, then those organizations will tend to be fined. Why? Because of those data breach. And also, there must be some security frameworks that they must put in place. Concepts that we're going to look at, like the share responsibility, defense in depth, also zero trust, which you actually organization can use to build a robust security strategy. Because it's very important for every organization. The first thing, the primary thing that they need to put in place is a security strategy. So before you start deploying resources, either on your on-premises network or deploying resources in a cloud, like the Microsoft Azure or the AWS, right? There's a need to have a security strategy leveraging on the security framework. Then also there's a concept called encryption and hashing. We're going to look into that. So they're actually they are essential techniques that organizations can use to protect sensitive data from unauthorized access. Then lastly, why compliance is important. Ensure that you have to adhere to industry and also regulatory requirements for critical data privacy and also for organization trust. In a scenario whereby you are gathering data from people and those data are not secure, then there's a problem, there's an issue. Like when we sent out a form now that few, the form that everybody on the Bootcamp field is residing in a particular location. And it is only limited people that have access to those forms. Why? Because of data privacy. The data that you fill in are secure, they are protected to ensure that people are not, those data are not, stolen. That's why we have to create an environment to ensure that as we're filling those data are well secure. So let's talk about the first concept, which is talking about, we want to describe what a shared responsibility model is. Now, for organizations that are running only on-premises hardware, maybe they have their own data center and they have their softwares. Those organizations, they are responsible for ensuring that they implement security and compliance. 100%, it is their responsibility. Now, the moment organizations start leveraging on cloud services, so with cloud-based services, what happens is that that responsibility is shared between the organization, which you can call the customer, and the cloud provider. And what the shared responsibility model does is that it helps us to identify which security task is the responsibility of the cloud service provider that the organization is using, and which security task is handled by the organization. So you are the admin of the organization, what are the responsibility in terms of security that you must take care of? What are the responsibility that the cloud service provider must take care of? Again, if you are using on-prem, you are responsible for the security 100%. But the moment you are using either cloud or hybrid, for example, now, then there's a shift in responsibility. And responsibility depends on different workload that is hosted. Now, there's what we call SaaS, which is software as a service. There's what we call PaaS, platform as a service. And there's what we call IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. Now, for SaaS, I'm going to show us now. For SaaS, it means that there's a level of you are responsible for taking care of some parts of the security for your organization. Why for a platform too, you are responsible, you are sharing some, you are totally responsible for some. For infrastructure, for on-prem data center, you are responsible. So basically, what the share responsibility model does is that it makes responsibility to be clear. So when organization, again, when they move to the cloud, some responsibility will be transferred to the cloud service provider, while some of them will actually be for the customer itself. That means you're responsible. Now, this is how the shared responsibility model looks like. Now, if you have to start from the extreme end here, which is the infrastructure, the on-premises, right? Now, again, I mentioned that if you have your on-prem data center, right, you are responsible for everything. That means you are responsible for the physical data center. That means your organization must employ a security man. In Nigeria, we call them a guard, right? That'll be responsible to ensure that the physical data center is secure 24/7. The organization must ensure that, in on-prem data center, you're responsible for everything. The physical security, so the encryption of the sensitive data, you are responsible for the physical network. That means you must have a networking team who have knowledge of network security, and you're responsible for the security. The host, the VM, the host where you're going to host all your virtual machines on in the data center, you're responsible for them. The operating system that will be installed, you're responsible to ensure that they are up to date. So that is something that if you're running an on-premises, right, that is what you have to do. You're responsible for everything, 100%. You're not sharing that with a cloud service provider. Now, the moment if you move to the second one, which is the IaaS now, some of the responsibility shifts. Now, of all the cloud services, whether it is SaaS, software as a service, PaaS, platform as a service, or IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service now, infrastructure as a service requires the most management by you as a customer. Meaning that with infrastructure as a service, you are using the cloud service providers computing infrastructure, and you as a customer, you are not responsible for the physical data center. If you're using Microsoft as your cloud service provider now, Microsoft is responsible for the physical data center. They are also responsible for the physical networks. They are also responsible for the physical host. So what you are responsible for as a customer to Microsoft is that you are responsible from the operating system upward to the network controls, the applications. You have to ensure that there is network segmentations, the application that you are hosting, on the virtual machines. You have to ensure that they are well secured, they are protected. You are responsible for the identity and the directory infrastructure, talking about the Microsoft Entra ID or the Active Directory. Then the accounts, the users that you provision, the accounts, the identity, maybe their device identity, their managed identities, you're responsible for all those things. Then the devices, the mobiles, the PCs, you're responsible for that. Why Microsoft as the cloud service provider, you're responsible for the physical host. So the software running, right, you're responsible for it. The operating system, the application, you are responsible to ensure that your data are protected. So that is for infrastructure as a service. Now, if you come to platform as a service now, you notice that for platform as a service, what it does is that it provides an environment for you. Either you want to build or you want to test or you want to deploy software applications. And the goal of platform as a service is to help you to create an application quickly without managing any underlying infrastructure. Meaning that with PaaS, right, the cloud service provider, they are responsible to manage the hardware, the operating system. What you are responsible for is the application and data. So if you notice from here to operating system, right, the cloud service provider is responsible for it. Now, if you notice from network, application, and identity, there is a shared responsibility. There are things that you as a Microsoft customers, you are responsible for, while there are things that Microsoft are responsible for in terms of maybe network segmentation, creating your network security groups, application security groups. We've discussed all those ones. If you go to our YouTube channels, we talked about them in is a 500, right? You are responsible for creating all those things. While Microsoft is responsible for some parts, you are also responsible for some parts. Now, for SaaS, software as a service, software as a service is actually hosted and managed by cloud service provider for customer. Most of the time, it is usually licensed either through a monthly or annual subscription. For example, now we are using Microsoft Teams for this call. I don't have to know where Teams is hosted. I don't manage the infrastructure. Mine is to just sign in. So Microsoft 365, for example, they are software as a service, right? You use the Word, you use the Excel, you use the PowerPoint. You don't even care where the underlying infrastructure is hosted or is being managed. Your work is just to use the applications, right? Those are software as a service. Now, for software as a service, right, till the application level, your cloud service provider is responsible. Then there's a shared responsibility between you and the cloud service provider. Because if you need to, maybe you have enterprise application app registrations, you are responsible to creating those yourself, right? Even though that's the environment, right? But the account identity, you're responsible. Like in Microsoft 365, for example, now, either in the admin center or using the Entra ID, you can create users. You are responsible for creating users. Users are just employees in your organizations, right? So again, a lot of us, we use either Google Mail, Gmail today, right? You don't know how it's being managed. What you just do is that you send and you receive emails. But the cloud service provider, which is a Google Cloud Platform, right? They are managing the underlying infrastructure that the Gmail is hosted, right? So there are things that you're responsible for. For your Gmail, what are you responsible for? You are responsible for creating your own account, right? Then sending emails to people with the account. You're not responsible for how the application is being updated, how the application is being managed. You're not responsible for all those things. You're just using it because the cloud service provider is responsible for managing everything in SaaS except the data, the devices that is being used, the accounts, as well as the identities. Meaning that for SaaS, it requires the least amount of management by you as a customer. So if there are questions, you can be dropping them in the chat. I'll be picking them and answering those questions. All right, let's move ahead. Now, again, this is just to summarize what I've discussed so far. Again, for the on-premises environment, you as a customer, you're responsible to manage all aspects, including the physical security, the data encryption on the on-prem data center. While for the IaaS, there's a shared management. You as a customer, you manage the software, you manage the data, while the cloud service provider will handle the physical infrastructure. Then in PaaS, the provider will manage the hardware, even the operating system. So your own focus as a customer is to focus on the application and the data in the platform as a service. Why for SaaS, it's a minimal management where the provider manages nearly all the components except your data as a customer, devices that are plugged into your environment, as well as the identity. Yes, Zoom and Facebook, they are SaaS. They are SaaS. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Yeah, Chicos, the session is recorded, so you can always watch the recording. Okay, you can watch the recording. Now, the next thing we want to look at is a concept called defense in depth. Defense in depth. What is defense in depth? Now, defense in depth, what it does that it uses a layered approach. Yeah, Netflix, they are all SaaS because you don't manage the underlying infrastructure. Prime, they're all SaaS applications, yes. So defense in depth uses a layered approach to security rather than relying on a single perimeter, right? And a defense in the strategies uses what we call a series of mechanisms, and the purpose is to slow down the advance of an attack. Let's say a cyber criminal, for example, or an hacker want to, hack into your environment. The concept of defense in depth is actually something that you can use for your organization to ensure that you slow down how those attackers, can actually attack your environment. And they're actually in layer, right? For each layer protects, they provide different protection so that if one layer is breached, what happens is that subsequent layer will be prevented, will actually prevent the attacker from unauthorized access. Now, let me show you how defense in-depth looks like. So this is how defense in-depth looks like. So at the top here, we have a physical security. So in a scenario whereby you use a physical data center, there's a scenario I remember about this for defense in-depth. When I was working with my previous employer, right? Even though I'm the most senior engineer as part of the cloud team and the sysadmin, I don't have access to our on-prem data center. Even though I have assets in the data center that I'm responsible to manage, if I need to access the data center, I need to reach out to the data center administrator. In fact, I need to raise a ticket that I want to access the data center before they will grant me access. Granting me access means that they will escort me into the data center because I'm not a data center administrator. I only have assets sitting in data center. We have a lot of assets sitting there. So they will escort me. The moment I enter the data center, there's a register I need to fill also that I enter this data center this time. By the time I'm done doing whatever I'm doing and I want to leave the data center, I also sign out that I'm leaving. Why? Because for physical security now, you have to limit access to data center only to authorized personnel. The only two set of teams that are allowed that have access to the data center are the data center administrator and our network engineers. Those two teams, they have direct access into the data center. Every other team, including the system admin, the cloud team, we don't have direct access. That means our access card, our ID card, which is also our access card, cannot log into the data center. But the guys that are data center administrators and network guys, even their fingerprints, they can use it to access the data center because part of their role requires them to have access to the data center. So that is the first level of defense in depth, which is physical security, by limiting access to the data center to only authorized personnel only. Now, after the physical security, there's another layer called identity and access. Now, the identity and access control, what it does that if you use things called multi-factor authentication or conditional based access to control access to infrastructure and also to ensure that any changes that is happening, you are controlling those changes. So the identity and access is where we have is a part of what we talk about authentication and authorization. For example, when you join an organization, the first thing you are given, maybe they give you official laptop, right? They will give you a credential, which is usually a username and a password for you to sign into that laptop. That is where identity and access comes in. So that means today now, I'm not a staff of MTN. Because I'm not a staff of MTN, for example, now, I don't have an identity with MTN. I don't have an email or a password to even access resources the way a staff of MTN will have access to it. Or Coca-Cola, for example, now. I'm not a staff of Coca-Cola. But the organization I work with, I have a username and a password that I can use to access. And because I'm not even part of the administrator, I don't have administrative rights to our tenants, right? I don't have. The only thing I have access to is my email, my Teams, my SharePoint, or anything they've given me access to. That's what I have access to it. So that is a second layer in terms of defense in depth. After you protect the physical security, the next thing is identity and access. Now, in the age of cloud computing that we have now, the new perimeter in terms of security is even identity and access. Because if your account is breached, and let's say that account is an admin account, that means the bad actor can wreak more havoc in that environment, in your organization tenant. Why? Because identity has become the new perimeter. The next layer in defense in depth is a perimeter. Now, perimeter security talks about the security of your corporate network, which includes things around DDoS. DDoS is denial of service. Is a form of a denial. DDoS protection is a form of a filter that you can use at a large scale for your organization to protect attack before they cause a denial of service for users. Imagine you're trying to, access a particular portal. Maybe your organization have an enterprise portal, and that enterprise portal has an application, like an enterprise application that you guys use. You cannot access it because a bad actor was able to go into using maybe a credential, an admin account, and was able to block access to this particular enterprise. So the perimeter security is actually to protect your corporate network from distributed denial of service, DDoS, right? So that's another layer. Another layer is the network. Now, network security, such as network segmentation or network access control, is actually to limit communication between resources. For example, now, you have a dev environment, a development environment, you have a production environment, and you have, let's say, a testing environment. As a network engineer, or the network engineer must ensure that there is network segmentation between those production, corporate, or testing or development environments. With my previous employer now, we have some IP range for production, we have for corporate, we have for dev, and we have for UAT. Then we have for testing environment. They are segmented, meaning that from dev, I cannot access production. From UAT, even from my corporate account, from a corporate server, I cannot access the production server. Right? So that is, you are implementing defense in depth. You are ensuring that there is network segmentation, there is network access control. All the network engineers, based on their role, they have different access level. Not all the network engineers have access to every part of the network. I, as a sysadmin, that was responsible for different servers. There are some production servers that I only have access to. That means my accounts can sign into. There are some other production server, because I'm not responsible for them, my account cannot sign into them. That's network access control. And there are even some parts of the network that, because I'm not part of the network team, I don't have access to them because I don't manage them. I only have access to the corporate, the production environment based on the production servers that we use, the production AD that we use, the corporate AD servers that we use, that's domain controller, or the testing environment that we use for testing and development. So I don't have access to any other servers that are not in my purview. Now, the next layer in defense in depth is compute. So compute layer security, such as securing access to virtual machines, either on premises or in the cloud, by closing certain ports. Yes, because not all VMs I have access to. I only have access to VMs that my team manages. Any VM that my team does not manage, my accounts cannot log in into that VM. So that's another layer. And the reason why we implement defense in depth itself is to prevent what we call lateral movement. If a bad actor is able to enter the network and the person wants to move into different parts of the network, maybe he was able to hack into the corporate network. From the corporate network, the bad actor wants to go into the production network, for example. Now you've used that network segmentation and network access control to prevent that lateral movement from the bad actor being able to access every other part of the network. Then the next layer is the application layer. So application layer security ensures that applications are secure and they are free from security vulnerabilities. So at the application level, you're ensuring that that application that you have deployed does not have any security vulnerabilities. So meaning that even though the bad actors was able to access different parts of your network, because your application is secure, they will not be able to access it, right? And lastly, we talk about the data. So the data layer security includes controls to manage your access to either your business data or your customer data, and the encryption of any protected data. Any data that are sensitive data or highly sensitive data, those data are usually encrypted. We call them special category data. Those data, you must ensure that they are encrypted. Any data that you know that they are highly classified data that your organization is dealing with, they must be encrypted, right? So data layer security is where you actually take care of managing access to who are the people that should have access to our organization enterprise applications, or this data, finance data should only be accessed by maybe people in the finance team, or HR data should only be accessed by people in the HR department. Yeah, thank you very much. Microsegmentation. Thank you, Tululope. Yes, that's very correct. PM, did I say PM? Not sure I said PM at all. All right, let's move on. So that is the concept of defense in depth. So the idea of defense in depth is a layer security mechanism and their role. So I mentioned physical security, right? You limit access to your physical facility like the data center to only authorized personnel only. And for identity and access control, you leverage on multi-factor authentication, use conditional access. Those are the things we're going to discuss in our IC 300 in details, right? When we talk about identity and access, right? Multi-factor authentication, conditional access policies, right? The purpose is to regulate access to any infrastructure or people that want to make change. Then the perimeter security itself, using the DDoS protection, right, to protect your entire perimeter for your infrastructure itself. Then the data layer security. So I mentioned that managing access to control and encrypting data to protect business and customer information. So ensure that bad actors does not get access to that, because the moment they get access to those data, they can go to the dark web to sell those data, right? They can go there. They can even, trigger what we call a malware called ransomware, that before you can get access to this data, you have to pay some money. Okay, VM is virtual machines here. Thank you. All right, so that is defense in depth. So let's look at another important concept, the concept of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, for confidentiality, integrity, and availability, if anything you are doing as a security engineer doesn't ensure these three, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, then what you're doing is wrong as a security engineer. What you're doing is wrong, because we call these three, we call them Triad, right? Because those three must always work together: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As a security engineer, the value that you can provide to your organization are around this three triangle. That's why it's always represented by a triangle. This information, is it confidential? Integrity of the information and availability. We don't have much time. We'll have, ask questions, or you can drop in the chat. What is confidentiality? What do you understand by integrity? And what do you understand by availability? You can use the chat to drop. You can use the chat to drop. Now, when you talk about confidentiality, right, it's actually a need to keep confidential, sensitive data, such as it could be customer information, it could be password, or financial data. Maybe the salary, payroll, what you guys are making in your organization, right? You can encrypt data to keep it confidential, but then you also need the encryption key confidential as well. So with confidentiality now, is actually the most visible part of security that we can clearly see the need for sensitive data. It could be key, it could also be a password, and other secrets to be kept confidential. So you must ensure that as you work as a security engineer, confidentiality is very, very key. Any sensitive data, PII data, customer data, your business data, because once bad actors get a hold of those data, they can sell them in the dark web. Now, if you talk about the second one, which is integrity, integrity refers to keeping data or messages correct, meaning that when you send an email message, for example, now, you want to make sure that the message that is received is the same message that is sent. And also, when you store data in a database, you want to be sure that the data that you retrieve is the same data that you stored in that database. That is integrity. Meaning that encrypting data will actually keep data confidential, but you must then be able to decrypt that data so that it is the same as if it was before it was encrypted. And basically, integrity is about having confidence that data has not been tampered with or it has not been altered. That is integrity of data. You must ensure that data has not been tampered with. Then the last one talks about availability. Availability is not just important that information is kept confidential and is integrity, right? Availability means that you are making data available to those that need it, not for everybody. You're making it available to those that need it and when they need it. I mean, it is important that organizations keep customer data secure, but at the same time, it must also be available to employee who deals with those customers. It must. So why it's actually more secure to store the data in an encrypted format? Employee need access to actually decrypt the data. And your goal in your cybersecurity strategy is to preserve the confidentiality, is to preserve the integrity, is to preserve the availability of system, network, application, and data. Because the goal of any cyber criminal is to disrupt those goals, to ensure that your data are exposed. The data that you store is not the same data that you're trying to retrieve, right? So, and one thing that Microsoft does is that Microsoft tries to create solutions to ensure that organization can deliver goals on the CIA triad, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Thank you very much, Jude, for that. So confidentiality is privacy, integrity is source, and who is privy to its availability. Thank you, Jude, for that. All right. So again, we've discussed about this already. So again, confidentiality is very important, again, to protect sensitive data by using encryption and, securing the encryption keys from unauthorized access. How can we secure encryption key? Can somebody drop that in the chat? How can we secure encryption keys? If you have an idea. Then for integrity, ensuring that data is accurate and they are unaltered, providing confidence that the messages that are stored remains unchanged. Then lastly, availability, ability to make sure that data is accessible to authorized users when they need it, because you have to balance security with usability. There is no point users needing a data and they cannot access the data. So you must balance security with usability. Sorry, I'm rushing because I still have a lot to cover. We are almost out of time. Now let's talk about the concept of zero trust. Zero trust. What is zero trust? When you talk about zero trust assumes everything is on an open or untrusted network, right? Even if the resources are behind the firewalls of a corporate network. For the zero trust model, it operates on a principle, and the principle is that trust no one. Verify everything. With zero trust, you don't trust. For example, now, let's say you receive an email. You have to be sure, and the email has a link. Let's say the email is a phishing email, for example, right? You don't trust, you don't just click on the link. So that is part of your zero trust. You have to be sure, okay, the person that is sending this email, is he a trusted sender? Am I even expecting this email? Part of the content of the email doesn't involve me clicking on the link or opening a link. So that's what zero trust does. Now, what attackers do is that they have the ability to bypass conventional access control, using the traditional security, for example, is no longer sufficient. So if you are saying, okay, the traditional security means, okay, everything that is happening is within the network. What if somebody send the phishing link and people start clicking on it? You're saying that, we have a firewall. Doesn't make sense. So you don't trust the integrity of a corporate network security. You don't trust it. So in practice, what it means is that you don't assume that a password is sufficient to validate a user. So that's why you have to add a multi-factor authentication to provide additional checks. A user wants to sign into an account. A password is not enough. And also, instead of granting access to all devices in the corporate network, users are allowed to access only some specific applications and also the data that they need. So that is you implementing zero trust. So in terms of concept, for zero trust itself, what it does is that it treats all network resources as untrusted, ensuring a continuous verification to strengthen the security. That's the concept of zero trust. Never trust, always verify. That's zero trust. There's a limitation with traditional security in terms of access controls are insufficient as attackers can bypass them. How? Through phishing email, phishing links, and all those things, right? And that brings us to needing a stronger security strategy as an organization and adding multi-factor authentication, like I mentioned earlier, to validate beyond just password. This will actually help to improve security. Now, there is a way even the bad actors are trying to bypass MFA. Yes, because they are getting smarter. We are in the era of AI, so a lot of things are happening. So that's why organizations need to be very, very, careful. And that is where the concept of zero trust ops. Now, then you only grant access to necessary application of data by minimizing risks, by limiting access to resource exposure, right? So it is, if I need access to just data A, that should be the only thing that I should have access to. That is the overall concept of zero trust. Now, zero trust has what we call some guiding principles. What are the zero trust guiding principles? It has 3 of them. The first one is verify explicitly. Now, you always authenticate and authorize using multiple data points like identity, location, device security status. You must verify explicitly. So that is where your multi-factor authentication comes in here, MFA, right? To ensure that, okay, this user, is he signing in with the correct account? Is the user having the right access, right? Is the user signing in for the expected location? That is where conditional access comes in, right? Maybe all your staff are supposed to work from within a, maybe they are all supposed to work from US, and somebody is trying to sign in from Canada. So it will trigger a conditional access. It should trigger a conditional access, right? Except an exception has been created for that user. The second principle for zero trust is least privilege access. You limit access with just in time and just enough privilege to balance security and productivity effectively. If a user does not need access to a particular server, you don't grant that user access to that server. If a user does not need access to a particular admin roles, you don't grant that user access to that admin role. In fact, what Microsoft is trying to do is that Microsoft is trying to use what we call PIM, privilege identity management, where you use that to grant access. Even user does not have permanent admin rights. They have to go and activate the right. After some period, the admin rights become disabled. So least privilege access is something. If you're not an admin of an organization, you don't need access, right? You don't need access to the admin center because you're just a user. Yeah. And the last guiding principle is assume breach. You design your infrastructure in such a way that you assume that there is already a bad actor, a cyber criminal in your organization. You segment your network using encryptions, using detection, then even using different solutions like maybe Defender for Cloud, for posture security, for security posture management. You can use that. So these are the three guiding principles for zero trust: verify explicitly, least privilege access, and assume breach. Now, zero trust has some pillars. We call them foundational pillars of zero trust. Now, again, we said that zero trust means that trust no one, verify everything. Now, these are the 6 pillars that zero trust has. Now, in the zero trust model, all elements works together to provide an end-to-end security. And all these elements, they leverage on what we discussed earlier, the 3 guiding principles: verify explicitly, least privilege access, and assume breach. Now, one of the pillars is identity. Identity can be your user account, a service account, it could be a device. So when an identity attempts to access a resource, what happens is that it must be verified with a strong authentication, and it must follow the least privilege access principle. The same thing goes for a device. Device basically, they create a large attack surface because as data flows from one device to an on-prem workload and to the cloud, so it is very important that you monitor device for health and compliance. So this is where somebody mentioned Microsoft Intune earlier. So device compliance is part of Microsoft Intune, that you use to ensure for zero trust. Then for applications, for example, now applications are a way that data is consumed. This includes, you must discover all application that is being used in your organization. Sometimes you have users in your organization that are using some application that you've not certified as an administrator. We call them shadow IT because not all applications are managed centrally. So you need to manage permissions of those applications. The access level of those applications is very important. Then also for data layer, your data must be classified, they must be labeled, and they must be encrypted based on their attributes, right? So your security efforts are ultimately about protecting data, and you want to ensure that it remains safe, and when it leaves a device or an application or infrastructure, it is still safe, right? Because your network the network in your organization is actually controlling those data. We're going to discuss some concepts about data at rest, data in transcripts as we move ahead. Now, another layer is infrastructure. So whether your infrastructure is on-premises based in your own data center, which is private cloud, or a cloud based, it actually represents a threat vector. So to improve security, you must assess for version, you must assess for configuration, you must do what we call JIT, just in time access, and also use telemetry to detect attacks, detect anomalies, and also at the infrastructure level, you ensure that you automatically block or you flag any risky behavior and you take a protective actions. It's very important. Then the last pillar is a network, right? Network again must be segmented, including a deeper network micro segmentation. Somebody mentioned that earlier, right? Also a real-time threat protections, as well as an end-to-end encryption, monitoring, and analytics also should be employed. So overall, your security strategy, that employs these three principles of zero trust model across these pillars, will help your organization to deliver and enforce security across your organizations. So I don't know if you have any questions so far. I'm looking at the chat. If you have questions, we still have a lot to cover. Just give me a moment. All right, let's talk about okay, Sunday, I can see your question. Yeah, I will share the learning path that you can read up regarding this, right? I'll share the learning path. Yeah, the same way with Chigozie. Yeah, I'll share that. Now let's look at the concept called encryption and action. What is encryption and action? Now we'll talk about data protection. Now, one way to mitigate against common cybersecurity threats is to actually encrypt sensitive or valuable data. So what is encryption? Encryption is actually a process of making data unreadable and unusable to unauthorized viewer, meaning that to use or to read an encrypted data, it must be first decrypted, which requires the use of a secret key. Now, we have on the high level, we have two types of encryption on the high level. So I say encryption is the process of making data unreadable and unusable to unauthorized viewer. And to use or read encrypted data, it must be, decrypted first. And to decrypt any data, you must use what we call secret keys. Now, on the high level, we have what we call symmetric encryption. Now, for symmetric encryption, the same key, secret key that you use to encrypt the data is the same key that you're going to use to decrypt it. This helps you with quick and secure communications. Why for the second one, which is the asymmetric encryption now? What this does is that it employs a public and a private key pair. One key, which is a public key, is used to encrypt the data, while the other key, which is a private key, is used to decrypt the data. And the goal is to actually enhance security for different online protocol. I saw that somebody mentioned those protocol, the TLS protocol, yeah, right? So that is the goal of encryption. Now to decrypt data again, you need a pair key. For example, if the public key is used to encrypt the data, like we see in this diagram now, you must use the corresponding private key to decrypt the data. Now for asymmetric encryption, it uses it is used for things maybe you want to access some websites on the internet that uses the HTTPS protocol, or you want to use the electronic data signing solution. So encryption may protect the data. Either the data is at rest or the data is in transcripts. Now, let's talk about the concept of encryption for data at rest and data in transcript, as well as data in use. Now, for data at rest, data at rest is secure by encryption, making any stored information unreadable without decrypting the data. So meaning that the data can be stored either in a database or it can be stored in a storage account. But regardless of where it is stored, encryption of data at rest ensure that data is unreadable without the key and the secret that has been used to decrypt it. So if a bad actor, for example, a bad actor or a cyber criminal, an attacker, was able to gain access or able to maybe gain access to the hard drive where the data is encrypted, for example, they will not be able to access or read the data. Why? Because they will need the key to decrypt the data. So that is where the encryption of data at rest come into play. Now, for encryption of data in transcript, data in transcript is actually a data that is moving from one location to another, such as maybe across the internet or through a private network. So for a secure transfer, you can handle that by using different layer. It can be done by either using encryption of the data at the application layer before sending it over the internet. For example, if you use the HTTPS protocol, for example, is an example of encryption in transcripts. And encrypting data in transcripts protects it from outside observer. It provides a mechanism to transmit data while limiting, risks to the data exposure. That's what data encryption in transit does. Then sometimes you are currently using a data. How do you encrypt data that is in use? Now, a common use of data encryption for data in use involve securing data in a non-persistent storage, such as in the RAM, read access memory, or the CPU cache, for example. And this can be achieved through technologies that can create an enclave. Maybe you think about a secure lockbox, right? That protects the data and keep the data encrypted while the CPU processes the data. So that is the concept of encryption, be it data at rest, in transit, as well as data in use. Our time is actually up, so I would like to know from you if you still want me to continue. I still have a few more slides to continue. So the question I was trying to answer actually took our time. So if you want me to continue, can I get some reaction bots here or drop a chat? Or if you want us to stop here, we can stop here as well. Okay. All right. Because of the question and answer we had earlier, so it took time. This particular topic is actually like a 2 hours topic itself or 3 hours topic. So, all right, let's continue. Let's see how much we can cover. Now, the second concept is hashing. What is hashing itself? Hashing uses what we call algorithm, right, to convert text into a unique fixed length value called hash. And each time the same, text is hash using the same algorithms, right? And the same hash value, is produced. That's the hash can actually then be used as a unique identifier for the associated data. Now, for the hashing hashing is different from encryption in the sense that for hashing, it doesn't use keys. The hash values is not subsequently decrypted back to the original. That's different between hashing and encryption. What hashing does is that it often uses to store password, meaning that when a user enters their password, the same algorithm that is created that stored the hash creates a hash of the entered password. And this basically is to compare the stored hash version of the password if they match with what the users, like maybe you want to access any platform. You want to go into your Facebook or your Twitter or your Instagram, you type your username or your email address and you type the password. Now, when you're creating that account at the point of signing up, what happened is that when you created that password, the hash of that password is stored somewhere, either in the Facebook database. So the moment you are trying to sign in, after signing up again with the same password, it's going to convert that password to an hash variable, right? It's a unique fixed length. And it will compare that hash with the one that was stored when you are signing up, right? So when it compares, it sees that it matches. You can now see that signing is successful. You'll not be able to access the platform. So that is where hash is different from encryption, right? So we use them to store password, basically now. And basically, the hash is actually more secure than storing the password as the plain text because hashing algorithms are also known to hackers because hash functions are deterministic, meaning that the same input will produce the same outputs. That means that hackers can actually use brute force dictionary attacks by hashing the password. So for every match hash, they know the actual password. Now, in order to mitigate this particular risk, password are actually use what we call is sorted. We use password hashing and also password sorted, meaning that you use a fixed length of a random value to input the hash functions to create a unique hash for the same input. Why? Because you want to ensure that your account is protected from a bad actor, basically. So that's the concept of encryption and hashing. So that's what we'll stop about security. Let's jump into compliance for now. Let's talk about governance, risk, and compliance. What is governance, risk, and compliance? Now, organizations faces an increasing complexity and a change in regulatory environments. Regulators are always bringing different regulatory requirements, right? So because of that, organizations need a structured approach for managing their governance, risk, and compliance. Now, for governance generally now, there's a need for a regulatory approach, right? Why? Because of different regulations, right? And organization must establish a governance risk framework, GRC framework, right? Which include policies, operational processes, even technologies to manage their GRC effectively. I remember in my previous employer, I deployed an application called Archer GRC. That is what our risk team are using, right? They use it for to manage risks across different parts of the organization, investors' risks, any risks at all. Now, let's look into governance, risks, and compliance. What does it really mean? Now, for an organization, it is very important that you establish a GRC competency, meaning that you must either establish a framework that include either you implement specific policies, operational processes, as well as specific technologies. And it will actually be like a structured approach to manage your GRC. Because at the end of the day, if you have that structured approach as an organization, it will help you to reduce your risks and it will improve your compliance as an organization. And it is very important that your GRC competency, you must understand what does governance means, what does risk means, what does compliance means. So let's quickly look into that. What is governance? Now, governance is a system of rules, practices, and processes an organization use to direct and control their activities. Meaning that many governance activities can either arise from external standard, obligation, or expectations. So when you're in a particular industry, there are some industry standard that you must adhere to. Where you are you have a particular regulators that need to regulate you as well. So those are external standard influence. So you need to adhere to external standard in terms of industry or regulatory requirements. there are obligations from those regulators, and there are expectations that you must meet. Otherwise, your organizations will be fine. So those are external influence. There are some other things that we must also consider. Things around access rule control, meaning that organizations need to establish rules and processes. And those rules must define who, what, where, and when users and application can access corporate resources, and who has the administrative privilege and for how long. So you must define who can access your corporate resources, what in terms of application can access your corporate resources, where can those resources be accessed from, and when can those resources be accessed from. So those are the access control rules that as an organization you must take care of. Otherwise, your governance framework will not be solid and you're going to be breaching regulatory requirements. The second one is the last one is the administrative privilege, right? I mentioned this now. Who is the person that is in charge of your governance? You must have maybe an head of GRC for your organization. That person will be responsible for any administrative rights. I remember there were some policies that we needed to, configure to ensure that our secure score and our compliance score meet with regulatory requirements. Again, what I just do as a security architect was that I had to download those recommendations that the Microsoft solution was giving us in terms of, okay, we're in the fintech industry. How can we ensure that we meet with regulatory requirements? So when I downloaded the report, what I did was so simple. I sent it to our CIO, which is the head of information, and also the head of our governance, risk, and compliance team. So we have to come together and agree, okay, this one's is part of our governance framework. We need to implement this, we need to implement this. And even before implementing, as a security architect, you must ensure that you follow the change management process of your organization, meaning that you must communicate, raise a change request, and communicate with the governance team and there must be an approval for that change request before implementing those security. Because if you implement anything and there was no change request approval and it disrupts the organization's productivity or anything, you'll be held accountable as a security architect. So part of the change request process is if there's going to be a rollback plan, maybe that thing is going to affect productivity for users in the organization, then that's the purpose of those change requests, right? You must work hand in hand with the governance, risk, and compliance team to ensure that any changes that you want to make to ensure that your organization meets security, compliance, or regulatory requirements, right? The GRC team must be carried along. Otherwise, you don't just go about signing in and you say, oh, I have an asset, I'm a security engineer, I can start making changes. Because if anything happens, if users are not able to perform their job, you'll be held accountable for it. So that's very important. That's one of the reasons why the administrative privilege, who is responsible? The head of GRC or the risk manager or whoever that is responsible in your organization, you must collaborate with such person to ensure that you follow the process. So that's governance. The next thing I want to look at is the risk management. So risk management is actually a process of identifying, assessing, and responding to threats or events that can impact your company or your customer's objective. So as an organization, you have an objective. So if there's anything that is going to affect, right, it's going to impact, it's going to ensure that you guys are not making sales or people are not able to work and productivity is low. So your work is to ensure that you identify, you assess, and you respond to those threats. Again, you have to collaborate with the governance teams, right? And for risks generally, we have can be external threats or internal threats. The external threats are threats that arises from outside the organization. It could be anything. It could be political, economic, weather. when there was COVID in 2020, for example, now that was an external threat to organization. A lot of organizations could not function, especially organizations that are on-prem. Organizations that were hybrid or they are cloud only, they were still able to function, right? So external threats can actually, affect the organization, and those are the things that you, as a security administrator, security engineer, or an architect, ensure that you take care of that for your organization. So, okay, these are the external threats. Is there a cyber criminal or an hacker or a bad actors that can hack into our environment? What are the threats? The tools you're using, maybe you're using Defender for Cloud, for example, now to measure your secure score for your organization, right? Those recommendations, discuss with your governance, risk and compliance team to ensure that you implement such. And also we can have internal threats. Now, internal threats are internal threats, or they are risks that arises from within the organization itself, meaning that it could be maybe a user has resigned, for example. Now he wants to leak sensitive informations. There's insider trading. There's what called internal risk management, right? It's part of Microsoft Purview solution. It's one of the things we'll discuss in our future bootcamp, right? Now, a user is leaving the organization. The user started downloading some confidential information, or started sending some things to his personal email, or wants to start uploading some things, some company's information into his personal OneDrive or Dropbox account. So those internal threats are part of the things that you, as a security architect, you have to also help your organization to avoid. Then the last one on this is compliance. So when you talk about compliance, so compliance ensures that there's a minimum legal standard that I meant. Now, compliance is actually, it could be a country, a region, a state, or even a federal law. It could even be a multinational regulation that an organization must follow, depending on the type of the industry. And this regulation defines what type of data must be protected, what processes are required under legislation, and what penalties are issued to organizations that fail to comply. So for you, you must understand those things. Working with the compliance officer or the chief compliance officer or whoever that is responsible. So what are the country or the regional regulations? What are the state or the federal laws, or even multinational regulations that we as an organization must follow, especially if the organization is multinational, for example now, right? So it is very important, to ensure that compliance is not the same thing as security, but security should be considered when building a compliance plan for your organization, right? So an effective security is frequently a compliance requirement. And compliance requires only that the legal mandated minimum standard are met, whereas data security covers all aspects of processes, procedures, even technology that you use that defines how you look after any sensitive data and how you guide against any data breaches, basically. So it's very, very important that you consider those tools. Now, there are different compliance related concepts that we can look at. The first one talks about data residency regulations. Now, when it comes to compliance, data residency regulation govern the physical location where data can be stored. For example, now, your company is operating in the UK, for example, now, by UK law, all data in the United Kingdom must reside in the United Kingdom. So in a situation whereby you have, people working for you that are outside the United Kingdom, then you must ensure that there is a way to ensure that the data they are accessing it within a shared environment. It could be a virtual desktop, right? Which is resident within that region. So data residency is very important because those physical locations where your data is stored, how and when it can be transferred or processed or even accessed internationally, you must ensure that you comply to it. And different jurisdictions have different data residency regulations. So you must understand, okay, this region I am now, I'm in the UK, I'm in the United States. What are the data residency regulation that I must follow for my organization? The next one talks about data sovereignty. Now, data sovereignty is a concept that data, particularly personal data, is subject to law and regulation of either a country or a region in which it is physically collected. Now, every data that we collected for this bootcamp, we collected it from Nigeria, and it is resident in Nigeria. That is data sovereignty. Why? Because we want to ensure that the data is being processed in Nigeria, wherever it's being processed is within Nigeria, is within that region where it is collected. And this can add a layer of complexity, something about data sovereignty, right? When it comes to compliance, because the same pieces of data can be collected in one location and stored in another location and processed in another location, making it subject to different laws from different countries or different regions. So data sovereignty is actually something that is very, very important. Now, the last concept around this is data privacy. What is data privacy? What data privacy does is that it provides notice or transparency about the collection, processing, use, and sharing of personal data, which are fundamental principles of privacy laws and regulations. Meaning that personal data are actually any information that is relevant to individuals. We call them PII, personally identifiable informations, right? And privacy laws encompasses any data that is directly linked or indirectly linked back to a person. So for an organization, they are subject to and they must operate in consistence with, no matter the number of laws, regulations, code of conduct, or even industry specific standards, they must comply with those standards that governs data privacy. Now, all organizations generally now, they must manage data so that they must understand different concepts that are related to compliance and the importance of meeting the minimum mandated law or regulations for those data. So you can't collect data from a region and process it in another region, right? You must understand the data privacy law for each of those regions. So that's the end of security and compliance. So you're moving to the last part of our discussion, which is the concept of identity. The concept of identity. Now, we mentioned earlier that identity is a new security perimeter. Now, everyone, even every device, have an identity that can be used to access resources. For example, when you join an organization, they can decide to issue you an official laptop, a workstation, right? That laptop will most likely be joined to the domain, and the laptop will have a MAC address, which is like the identity of that device. And you as a person that is joining the organization, you'll be given an ID, right? You'll be created, an email address will be created for you, right? An email address will be created for you that you can use to sign into those devices to access those organization resources. So identity is actually a way in which people or things are identified in your corporate network, whether it is on-prem or in cloud. So the goal is to be certain about who is accessing or what is accessing the organization data and other resources, because they are part of your fundamental security. If you want to secure your environment, you want to first of all know who is accessing it or what is accessing it. Where is this being accessed from? So for here, we'll look at different concepts around understanding what authentication is, what authorization is. Want to also look at identity being a new security perimeter Then we'll look at some identity related services. So let's start with the first one, which is authentication and authorization. Now, what is authentication? Authentication simply means it's a way of verifying a person's identity, often using credentials like password, right? A way in which you verify the identity of a person. Now, in general now, authentication is a process of proving that a person is who they say they are. For example now, if somebody purchases an item with a credit card, for example now, they may actually be required, depending on the platform, to provide an additional form of identification, which is to actually prove that the person is the person's who they say they are. Other form of verification could be other ID, can maybe using the driver's license or anything. So the same thing goes. So when you want to access a computer or a device or in your organization, you will encounter a similar type of authentication, right? In which maybe you may be asked to provide the username and the password. And if you have configured maybe fingerprint or face ID, that is also a means of identifications, right? So the username, right, itself is not enough. So you need to provide maybe a password alongside with it. And at the end of the day, when you provide those two, you're able to access the system or the device. So a form of identification is a username and the password. Now, the second concept here is authorization. What is authorization? So authorization determines the permission as well as the access level after a successful authentication. So the moment you authenticate to the laptop or to users, you need to decide where you can go. A typical scenario is that maybe you travel to a country on a vacation. You want to lodge in an hotel, for example, now. After you make your payment, they give you a key card after they identify you and everything. So that is your your authentications. Now that key card can only access maybe the lobby and the room you access to. That is authorization. If you take that key card to maybe another room to try to access, you'll not be able to access that room. Why? Because the key card has not been authorized to access that room, right? So in the entire process, if you go to the receptionist will verify who you are. They'll give you a key card. Then you can go to your room. So the key card is actually the authorization process. And the key card will only allow you to open the doors or the elevator you are permitted to access. Some organizations, some hotels, the key card will only take you to your floor. You cannot access another floor with that key card, right? So in terms of cybersecurity, authorization determines the level of access or the permission or for an authenticated person that has access to your data. So authorization, so we call it AuthZ or authentication AuthN. So that's a short form for both of them. I have a few more slides to go. Now let's talk about identity as a new security perimeter. Now, because of the cloud now, what happened is that digital collaboration has changed, meaning that your employees, your partner, they now need to collaborate and access organization resources from anywhere, on any device, and even without affecting their productivity. And there's also been an acceleration in terms of the number of people working from home. Like for me now, I work hybrid. I only go to the office maybe 4 times in a month, right? Every other time I'm working from home and I need to access our organization resources. So enterprise security needs to adapt to the new reality, which is the security perimeter can no longer be viewed as your on-premises network. So for example, now, if you're using the SaaS applications, maybe the M365, the Teams, for example, now, SaaS application for business critical workload, most of the time, they can be hosted outside the corporate network. And personal device that the employees are using to access the corporate resources, we call them BYOD, bring your own device, you know, while working from home. Some organization allows you to use your own device to access those things. Now, because identity is a new perimeter now, what happens is that any unmanaged devices that is being used by your partner or your customer when interacting with your corporate data or collaborating with your employer now, they can be hacked, right? But what is important is that if their identity is hacked and they are able to get into your network, your corporate network, so that's where the problem starts for you as an organization, because identity become the new perimeter. The traditional perimeter-based security model is no longer enough, meaning that the identity has become the new security perimeter that enables organization to secure their assets. Now, if you talk about identity, what do we mean by identity? Identity is actually a set of things that defines or characterize someone or something. Someone could be a user, something could be a devices, right? For example, a person's identity can include maybe information they use to authenticate themselves, right? Such as the username and the password and their level of authorization. So an identity may be associated with a user, it can be associated with it's an application, it can be associated with even a device or something else entirely, right? So that's why we say that identity is a new security perimeter. What the bad actor are after now is identity. They want to compromise people's emails. Every second, if you go and check the statistics, how many emails are being compromised by a bad actor, you'll be surprised. Why? Because identity has become the new perimeter. So we'll talk about this already. So identity being username, password, authorization level, or anything. So let's move into what are the 4 pillars of the identity infrastructure. What are the 4 pillars of identity infrastructure? Now, identity itself as a concept, right, spans an entire environment, entire tenant. So organizations need to think about it broadly. And there is actually a collection of processes, collection of technologies, collection of policies for managing digital identity and also controlling how they are used to access resources. And those identity can be classified into 4 identity infrastructure. The first one is administration. What is administration? Give me a moment, please. Now, when you talk about administration, it's about the creation and management of identity of users. If you join an organization now, an admin has created your account. So that's the administration. They will just give you the account for you to sign into either the official laptop or your own device. So administration is about the creation, the management, the governance of the identities of users, of devices and services. So meaning that as an administrator, you can manage how and under what circumstances you create different identity based on their characteristics. So you can either create identity, you can update identity, you can even delete the identity. So that's the first pillar of identity infrastructure, which is administration. The next pillar we'll talk about this is about authentication. Now, the authentication pillar tells the story of how much an IT system needs to know about an identity to have a sufficient proof that they are really who they say they are. It involves the art of challenging a party for legitimate credential. So before you can authenticate into a system, you must provide that username and password. So that is a way of challenging your credential to be sure that, okay, that was the identity that was created for you. Then at some point, you need to reset the password. So which is a different discussion entirely. So authentication is a second pillar. The third pillar we'll also talk about is the authorization. So the authorization pillar talks about the process of an incoming identity, determine the level of access for the authenticator person or service as within the application or service. So which room can you access? What can you do? That is what authorization is doing for you. Okay, based on the license that they assign to you, what are the services or the application that you can have access to? That is still part of authorization, right? So authorization is you determine the access level within the application. And the last pillar, which is one of the most important pillar, is auditing. Now, the auditing pillar is about tracking who does what, when did they do that thing, and how did they do it. And auditing could include having an in-depth reporting, alerts, governance of identity, right? And addressing each of these pillars is actually very key to a comprehensive as well as a robust identity and access control solution. Let me quickly show us something just to explain each of those pillars. Now, I'm bringing up a browser. If I type portal.azure.com, for example, now, the first thing is that it's challenging me for something to sign in. So I need to put in my username and password. But because I'm signing by default, if I click on any of this account now, it will sign in. So that is the authentication, right, pillar. The authorization pillar, because I'm an admin of this tenant, I can do other things. I can do some administrative rights. I can say, okay, let me go to the Microsoft Entra ID and create another person. Maybe another person join an organization now, right? A user join our organization. So I can use this Microsoft Entra ID to create the user. That is the administration pillar. Now, because I'm an admin, that is why I'm able to see this place. If I click on new user now, I'll be able to click on create new user. Somebody that is not an admin doesn't have an admin right. This create new user will be created out because the person will not be able to create it. If I click on creating, I can create a new user, right? I can just put the username. If I put John, right? Put the display name, fill everything, then review and create. Basic. Get display name John. That's missing. Properties. So I can create a user. So that's administration. I've created that user. That's the first pillar. Now that user needs to sign in to authenticate, just like the way I sign in here. Then based on the access level, will determine the authorization, will determine what the person can do. The person is just an ordinary user. What I'm able to do as an admin on this tenant now, the person will not be able to do it, right? Now, the last level, which is auditing. Now, if I go back home now, if I go to the Entra ID, I'm going to see a blade under monitoring. I will see different logs. So I can check audit logs. I can change signing logs and audit logs and some other logs. So this will give me logs. And this is very important. I'm able to see logs of what is happening on the tenant, right? I'm able to see, I can download it, right? So those are the 4 pillars of identity infrastructure. First of all, it starts with administration. An admin will create an account, or you are the admin, you create a user account. The user accounts we need to authenticate by providing the username and the password. Then based on the admin level, the person will be authorized to access different parts of the admin center. Then lastly, as an administrator, you must continuously check for auditing, sign-in logs, audit logs, you must continually check for it. I say, let me show us that so I can, to explain what I was discussing. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint. All right, few more slides to go and we're done. So let's talk about the role of an identity provider. Now, what I just showed us is the Microsoft Entra ID, right? Now, for an identity provider, for example, now when you talk about modern authentication, is an umbrella term for authentication and authorization method between a client right? Such as a laptop or your phone and a server. It could be a website or application. Now, at the center of a modern authentication is actually the role of an identity provider, right? We're going to go into this deeper because I'm just giving us an high level of it. So what an identity provider does is that it manages identity information, authentication of services, and centrally secure access. Like what I showed us earlier, right? It is actually an identity provider that stores users' information. Then another thing it does is it helps with authentication workflows. Identity provider will issue a security token for a server to access resource. Then it is responsible also for security and policy management. So based on user behavior, enforcement of different security policies, right? Then examples of identity provider. So Entra ID. When you sign in with your Gmail, for example, now it is authenticating against something, which is Google Cloud Platform, Google Workspace, right? If you have AWS account, is authenticated against the AWS account. Your LinkedIn is authenticating against a server. If you have a GitHub account, so they are all examples of identity provider. Then there's a concept called single sign-on and federation. What is single sign-on? Single sign-on allows users to log in once and access multiple applications without re-entering the same credential again. Let me quickly show us that. We are rounding up. We have just 3 more slides to go. Let me show single sign-on. What I mean by that. So for single sign-on now, you will log in once, but you can access multiple applications without re-entering your credential. Now, currently, I'm in Microsoft Azure. If I want to access other applications that my accounts have access to based on my license, if I go to the app launcher here, I can see these are other Microsoft Cloud solutions that I can access. Let's say, for example, now I want to go into Microsoft Intune. I just need to click on Intune and just click on sign in, and I'm in. That is single sign-on. So I'm using the same account. I don't have to enter a different credentials to access the Microsoft Intune portal. The same thing, if I go back there, if I go to the app launcher again here, let's say I want to go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I just click on it and it signs me into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I don't have to provide my credential again to access it. These are all called single sign-on, right? You log in once and you can access multiple applications. Within this Microsoft 365 also, I have a lot of applications. These are different applications I can access within Microsoft 365. All I just need to do, okay, I want to access, let's say I want to access Power Apps, for example. I don't have Power Apps license, but if I do have the license, it will just sign me in. I don't have to sign in again and again. That is a concept of single sign-on the high level, actually. So I don't want to actually pause. Now, if we talk about federation, what is federation? Federation enable access to several services across organization or domain boundary by establishing a trust relationship between the respective domain's identity provider. Today now, most of us, you can use your Gmail to access your Facebook. If you have used your Gmail, maybe use your Gmail to sign up. That is an idea of federation there. You can use your Gmail to access YouTube. You can use your Gmail to access Netflix. You can use your Gmail to access LinkedIn. That is the concept of federation, right? Using a different identity provider to access a different identity provider. Sorry, because of our time, I need to rush. So for federation now, what it leverages what we call trust relationship. You have to configure a trust relationship first. So I've mentioned the practical examples for your social media account, using your Gmail to access any other, your Facebook, your X, your LinkedIn, your YouTube, even your Netflix. That's the concept of federation there. So this is just to explain the concept of directory services like the Active Directory, right? So basically, the directory services stores and organize your network objects, right? Information that can be accessed by users and applications. Now, for a directory service, we'll call it ADDS, Active Directory Domain Service. It's not part of what we're going to discuss, but it's good to just know about it, right? It's actually your on-prem domain controller, we'll call it domain member, that can be used to verify credentials and control access to rights centrally. And also, one limitation of ADDS is that it lacks native support for mobile device and also for modern SaaS authentication method. And that's where you have access to. Okay, I think that's the last thing actually. So our Microsoft Entra ID provide a cloud-based identity provider for managing access across the cloud and on-prem application. So this is what we'll be looking at in our SC300 actually. We'll be talking about different parts of the Microsoft Entra ID. So I think if you have questions, that's the end of today's class. So if you have questions that you want to ask, maybe you want to drop them, okay. The link to the WhatsApp group. Emmanuel, can you help me go through some of the questions? So if you have questions, you can raise up your hands. I'll just unmute you, the ones you can answer, and those I want to ask questions previously as well too. If you have questions as well, if you want to ask. So let me allow mic for Promise. Promise, your mic has been allowed. You can ask your question. Osage, your mic has been allowed. You can ask your question. And those I want to ask questions previously as well too. You can also ask your questions.
Hello,
So
good evening.
I agree with you, Osage. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for this session. I really appreciate your effort and everything. So I just want to ask, the SC 900 from the beginning of this introduction, is it about SC 900 or is it the beginning of SC 900?
Yes.
I just dropped in.
Yeah, that's the beginning, yes. The beginning. Okay, just drop in, right? So you have access to the recording. The recording should be available in the next 48 hours on the YouTube channel. So go and subscribe on the channel. You have access to it. So it's the beginning. We started from the very beginning. Yeah.
The link to the channel, is it gonna be on?
Yeah, I think it was dropped on. I think it was dropped on the chat. Emmanuel, can you help me drop the link again? Or Steven, can you help me drop? So the link will be dropped to the chat. It's also be. Are you on the WhatsApp group? The link will also be dropped there as well.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, Papa Femi, you can ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Oh, thank you very much for the insightful class. My question is, the other time you said something about verification, and I'm aware that some, of course, I have some cloud engineers as friends, and I understand that sometimes they may not be at their region where they work, and there's restrictions for, like you said, that if you are not in a particular region, you may not have access to some data centers, even online and all. So my question is, in a situation whereby, because sometimes it might be, I reside in Ibadan, you understand, and sometimes they come to Nigeria, they work in the US, they come to Nigeria working as cloud engineers and remotely, of course, and sometimes they use routers, you understand, like VPNs, and they have access to that region. So in the case of a cloud security engineer, so do you think using VPNs is kind of dangerous? Excuse me. Do you think using VPNs is a threat to a cloud security engineer's work. You know, they are just cloud engineers. So sometimes they use VPNs when they are in Nigeria and the organization is not aware that they are out of their region, but they use VPNs in order to have access to their regions and still continue with their works. So I believe you understand my question. Do you think it is a threat for a cloud security engineer, for someone who is working in the same organization, to use VPN from another country which is out of the region to have access to informations and data in the region? And how do you think we can manage that? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that question, Femi. So again, right, I told you that I work remotely from home, meaning that I'm using my personal network to access my company data. On my official laptop, we have an official VPN that has been configured for all our laptop. The reason is because my company is a UK company, but we have onshore, nearshore, and offshore. There are some of our team members that are working from India. We call them offshore. We are working from Malta. We are nearshore. Some people are working from the UK. They are onshore. So for us to access some of our organization business data, we must connect to the VPN to work, right? So VPN is based on organizations, clients, and regulatory requirements. Now, for those people, I actually understand what you're talking about. For those people, right? Now, what they are trying to do is that the organization has already created a conditional access that they can't work outside the US. So the only way they can max it was to use those router and purchase VPN that has US IP address, right? Again, it is risky in the sense that they are working outside the prescribed region. But the VPN that they are using or the router that they've purchased is giving them access to US IP address. So that's the reason why the organization in US unable to detect. There are some other ways to detect, but I won't be able to say that on this call because of people on the call. But again, for me, for example, now, if I leave my region, I travel to Nigeria to go and work, organization will know I'm not in Malta. Even though I use VPN, they will know because there's a configuration. As I'm signing in, they will know where I'm signing in from and to flag immediately. So there are some things to do, but I will not say that on the call. I'm sorry about that. But again, it's a risk, but they've used the router and the VPN they purchased to max their IP address. So, yeah, so that's the best I'll be able to say for you on the score. Due to some security reasons, I'll not be able to say some things. Yeah, Greg, you can ask your question.
Yeah, Mr. Emmanuel, thank you once again for this lovely session. Can you just explain what you actually mean by just in time?
Okay, so there's what called just in time VM access. Let me explain that to you. Let me bring up the browser. So Microsoft has a solution called PIM, Privilege Identity Management. Now, there are some, ideally, because I'm the global admin of this tenant, or this account I'm signing here is a global admin, right? And maybe I'm not the global admin. I'm just, let's say I'm an AI administrator, for example, now. This just in time is provided by two things. PIM is one of them, Privilege Identity Management. I need to activate this role. If I click on activate now, it will tell me how long I can activate the role for. Immediately, let's say I want to activate the role. I think my network is taking time. So let's say this is 8 hours now. If I activate the roles to deploy, let's say AI models, So I'm providing justification why I'm activating this role, right? If I click on activate here now, what happened is that this role, AI administrator, will be activated for 8 hours. After 8 hours, it will go. I have to go back to activate it. So just in time, it provides just in time. So I need to use that role for 2 hours. I'll only activate it for that 2 hours. If I need to use that
Okay.
role for 8 hours, I'll activate for 8 hours. So that's just in time access.
Can you also specify, is it possible for them to do that? It can be 8 hours, maybe every day, or 4 hours every day. Can it be?
Yes. Yeah, you can
Okay.
configure that. So it's part of our SC300. So you learn that in your SC300.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So it will be, so the trainer that we train will show you how you can configure that. Okay, this role they can only activate, like for example, now maybe I'm a senior system admin in my organization, and I want to give a junior system admin to create users and assign license, and I only want him to do it within 2 hours. So I will configure the settings. So what I need to do is to go to the role settings. Right, I need to go to the. So I'll do in the setting that it's from the setting I'll configure that this role should only be activated for 2 hours. So meaning after 2 hours, the role will be deactivated. So the person will need to activate the role again. I will check for it. I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. So that is settings, yeah. So let's say the role that I need to configure settings the user administrator to create users and also to assign license. So it's from these settings I will configure it in such a way that this role, any user I assign this role to through ping can only activate the role for 2 hours. So it's taking a bit of time. Let me take the next question while this one is going. Yeah, Nene, you can ask your question, please. So it's from here, basically, I'll configure. Wait, I don't know why it's slow. It's opening, it's taking time slow. To show you different settings where you'll be able to configure the role. Hey, Nene, you can unmute yourself. Samuel, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you for such an insightful session. So basically what I wanted to ask was that I was filling the form and then it was asking for course name and I was a little bit confused. So I wanted to ask on that. And then
Course name?
Yeah. So when you're filling the form, it asks for the course name.
Okay, can you what form is that? The form to join the bootcamp?
The attendance form.
Oh, okay, attendance was sent. Okay, just on the group, on the WhatsApp group, let's take it on the WhatsApp group here. Let's take that on the WhatsApp group.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Let's proceed. Yeah, goodness, you can ask a question, please. Goodness. Okay. Lope, you can ask a question.
All right, thank you. Thank you. A friend of mine said I should hold you very well. He's a colleague of yours. We work together in PwC. Thank you for your time. So I just wanted to ask if the CCSP certification can be used in getting a role also in a Microsoft environment.
So to be honest, I'm not CCSP certified, right? And let me try to see the way I'll frame the answer to be sure. So Microsoft has what we call role-based certifications. So let me just show it out to you. So let's say type SC300, for example. let me just use the opportunity to show everybody how to get access to see all Microsoft certifications. So if you open any of the Microsoft certifications, so I just type SC300 and I open the first link, right? I just realized that I can renew my certification. I didn't know. Yeah, sorry about that. So we scroll down under certification resources, click on certification poster. So Microsoft has what we call role-based certification. Let me zoom in on this. So there are different categories: cloud and AI platforms, AI business solution, and security. So my focus is under security. So if you are looking for security certifications specifically for Microsoft, so you should focus on this. So the first one is the security fundamentals, which is SC900. Then this is for AZ500. So I mentioned it earlier on our YouTube channel from January to last month, we've covered AZ500 already. So that's why we're covering SC900 and SC300 for this bootcamp. The next bootcamp that will be happening in between April or May, we'll cover SC200 and SC401 in that particular bootcamp. Then lastly, we'll now cover the cybersecurity architect. So in the Microsoft space, they will request specifically for any of the security certification, not CCSP. CCSP is actually, we call it technology agnostics, meaning that different platform. It's not specific to one platform, maybe Microsoft or something. But if you're looking at working as a Microsoft security architect, then I'll recommend you go for any of this. SC900 is a 500, SC200 if you're interested in SOC, SC300 for identity and access, then information security for SC401. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Please, Goodness, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Goodness.
I am interested in SOC. Do I still need to progress with this class security?
To be honest, right? I had to pause before I answer that, sorry. The answer that was coming to my head. It's not a good response. So let me pause first. I wanted to say it's up to you, to be honest. But SOC, part of SOC work, we'll be dealing with it under the overview. Let me show you what the SOC part is. So this part, this is a learning series. Let me just share this with everyone for the fundamental. I'm dropping this in the chat now. So on this learning part of your work in SOC, it is this number 3 part here, Introduction to Security Solutions. It covers the fundamentals of SOC, right? So it will be our third class anyway. To be our third class, that's this part will be happening by next week Saturday. This will be happening tomorrow. This will be happening next week Saturday. This was the one I covered, right? So then this will be the last class on Sunday. We'll cover all the fundamentals. They will now move to apply skills. So it's totally up to you if you want to continue the class. So it's totally up to you, to be honest.
So if I want to get a certification, I will just go for the one under XC200.
Yes, SC200 is for SOC. But I recommend go through the learning part first before you write SC200 certification. Why? Because SC900 give you overview of everything on Microsoft solutions, security solutions. That's what it does for you.
Okay, so basically after SC900, the next step is the SC200.
You can do it, yes.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Victor, you can ask a question.
Okay, thank you very much for this session. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. You're welcome.
Yeah, so my question was basically on the VPN. So I just wanted to ask if there is any threats with employees using VPN outside work work environments? Because I know there was a time that a company had an incident and they stopped VPN access, and I was like, since VPN is secure, why did they have to kill all the VPN access? That's my question.
You have to rephrase the question. Can you
Okay,
re-ask the
so I
question?
just
Because it
wanted
sounds like
to
a
ask
statement.
if, okay, so if there are any threats or risk using VPN access outside work environments.
So I won't say there. In cybersecurity generally, there is nothing that is secure. That's what I would just tell you. There is nothing that is secure. So you have to ensure that the VPN provider you are using are trusted in the market, and their security regulatory compliance, they are complying, and their engineers are doing what they need to do to ensure that they are secure. The VPN, I don't use VPN on my personal system, right? But on my corporate system, in fact, it was installed before I even collected my corporate system, my corporate laptop. Since my organization has recommended it, so I believe that they will have done their due diligence to be using that VPN provider in code, right? So I'll not be able to advise on VPN or VPN. So this is not really a cybersecurity class. Yeah. For cloud, you don't need VPN. You know that, right? So the VPN that we configure for us on our system is to access companies' data. There are a lot of enterprise applications we have. You cannot access them without connecting to that VPN. So the networking segmentation has been configured around that. Yeah, so those are the work of cybersecurity guys. It's not part of our cloud security discussion. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Alabi, you can ask your question.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I can hear you.
All right, sir. Please, I need clarification on this. Please, what is the difference between or the similarity between Google Cloud Security and Microsoft Cloud Security? Because, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. I can hear you.
All right. Because I took some lecture on Google Cloud Security, and with your basic and this thing, I can see that there is much similarity from the fundamental lecture that you just give to us. So I just want to clarify: is it the same thing or they are different?
All right. Google, Microsoft, AWS, they are all cloud security providers, right? They are all
Right.
cloud security providers. The concept of security at the fundamental level is the same for everything. But when you now go higher at the point of configuring things, that's when it's different. The way you configured IAM in Microsoft is different from IAM in Google, different from AWS, right? So their
Okay.
concept is fundamentally the same thing at the fundamental level.
All
But
right.
if you sign into a Google environment now and sign into a Microsoft environment now, you see that there are two different things entirely. The same thing with AWS.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Fuse, you can ask your question, Fuse.
Yeah, good evening, man. Good evening, sir. Thank you for this lecture. I actually work in a data center here in Microsoft, and I work more on the data area, like the fiber area. Do like the connections of the fibers that brings the data center to operation, right? So I kind of wanted to have, um, up my skill, get something more on the cloud computing environment. So I want to know what are the steps, what are the certifications do I need to take? And I was actually doing the AWS before, but I kind of feel like going online to learn this stuff, that having a mentor, somebody you can talk to when you have questions, somebody that can guide you, when you are having questions, it's going to be very difficult. Even if you get a job tomorrow, with the way the system works, if you don't have somebody you can, chat, talk to about certain questions, you are going to be, kicked out of the job, distant time. So, what are the questions? That is the more reason why I'm in this section of this class. I feel like you are Nigerians. You guys are working in the system already. We're able to reach out to you. We have questions, and you're able to, guide us in areas we need clarity. So, what certifications do I need as somebody who wants to transfer from a data technician to a cloud solution architect? That's my question.
All right, thank you so much for that question. I mean, you're like we used to use one language. Cloud is somebody's computer, so you are the one in charge of the cloud you are using in the data center in
Yeah,
Microsoft. Yeah.
yeah.
So so it's cool. Well done, well done. So what you need is basically for Microsoft, right? So if you can see my screen, so there is a fundamental, so there's a path for it, right? So it depends on what you want to really learn. So let me give you my journey. My journey, I start with all the fundamentals, like all the Microsoft fundamental from AZ900, AI900, DP900, MS900, MB910. I've written everything. Why did I write it? I wanted to have an idea of every Microsoft cloud solutions because I know that I'm going into security and I want to be able to secure everything, be it Power Platform, Dynamics 365, Azure M365. That's what I do today in my current role. I secure everything. So I had the fundamental knowledge of everything at the fundamental level. So it now depends on which track you want to go. Do you want to go into Azure? So Azure, if you now come down a bit, Azure now has, so the next thing I would recommend after AZ900 is to write AZ104, right? So after writing AZ104 to become an architect, AZ305. So if you're just looking at the infrastructure part of things, then you can also write down AZ700, right? So this line is infrastructure part, right? If you want to now go into maybe you're in the age of AI already. So Azure AI engineer, I'm certified in AI, Azure AI 102. So I have the AI 900 and I have 102. You're in the age of AI, so why not, right? AI. Then if you're looking into development and DevOps, is a 204 developer association and is a 400 is a good part for you if you're looking at becoming an Azure DevOps engineer, right? It's a good part. Then I play also in M365 side of things, right? So every certification on M365, I have them. Intune, Intune Administrator, Teams Voice, and Teams. So it depends on what you want to write, but you start from the fundamentals, right? So this certification poster, let me post it on the group. So you can just go through it, start from the fundamentals, then move to the associates, then before.
So what is your class doing? Is your class giving us the fundamentals? Is your class helping us with certifications? Is your class helping us with having?
So we're only focusing. This particular bootcamp is only focusing on this security fundamental for security and identity and access administrator SC300. Those are the only two things we're covering, but there are some applied skills also that we'll cover as well.
So for me now, you by what you've said, I need to go back to. Can you go back a little bit to the Azure? Yeah, I need to go back to the Azure fundamentals and just take and follow that path, right?
You can follow this part. If you're interested in infrastructure, DevOps, still fundamental, then 204 and 400.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of DevOps, man, because I just
follow
feel
this
like,
part.
yeah, okay. So how do I get the classes? So you guys have a class? Okay, you're out of line.
I can see you. I just went.
Okay. Do you guys have a class for it, or I need to get like
So our community, is just security community. We don't do infrastructure. So we have another Nigerian community, Azure Nigerian community. They are the one that do those ones. We just focus on security in our community. We don't do infrastructure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, Nancy, can I ask a question? Hi, Nancy. Fiolua, you can ask a question.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Nancy, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, my network just keeps picking me up. So I wanted to ask a question. The basics were being taught, that the SA 900 and SA 300, are they enough to get like an entry-level job or something? Or we need to advance more before we can think of getting employed?
Yeah, so entry-level jobs in terms of cloud security, focusing on identity and access. Yes, they are for identity and access. Cloud
Okay,
security is
thank you
wide.
very much.
I don't know if you listened to when I was answering your question earlier about different areas in cloud security. So identity and
Yes, I heard.
access, cloud security, Azure security, yeah. So for IAM, yes, it is enough for IAM.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Fiolua.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Now, I have a question concerning the intersection between cybersecurity and cloud security. Because in some of the slides that you were showing us earlier, I saw some things that were kind of similar in terms of cybersecurity, like CIA, Triad, and all of those things. So I wanted to know if there's a way cybersecurity intersects with cloud security in terms of penetration testing.
Yeah, so for that particular question, how should I answer this question? So those are fundamental like security concepts. Now, cloud security is part of cybersecurity. Let me put it that way, right? Cloud security is part of cybersecurity. For penetration testing, so I think I have somebody on this call that can help me to answer that question. Steven, can you help me to answer that question? If you're on the call. Hi, Steven. Steven, you're talking on mute. I guess you're talking. So the reason why I will not be able to answer that question is because I am not a penetration tester. I'm not a cybersecurity person, right? I only focus on cloud security. That's where my career started from. So if Steven is on the call, he's able to unmute his mic, then he will be able to answer for you because he's a red teamer. So he does penetration testing.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so I will not be able to answer that question precisely in terms of I don't have the idea because I've never done penetration testing before. So I don't even know what they do in penetration testing. The only thing I do is vulnerability assessment, and I use Defender for Cloud for vulnerability assessments, but for penetration testing, I've not done that before. All right. Uba, can I ask a question, please? Uba. Okay, he's gone. Inina, you can ask a question. I think I jumped somebody. I jumped Osage. Okay.
Yeah. Hello.
Osage. Yeah, Osage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was just want to ask concerning the labs. Are we going to be responsible for the license by ourselves or the community?
Yes,
Or
you're going to be responsible for them. But like I mentioned earlier, what our course is covering, the apply skill part, Microsoft will provision a sandbox environment for you. Why the other parts? The license, you're not really paying because we're not in quotes provisioning Azure resources as part of this course. With the Microsoft Entra ID license, which can activate a trial. Right?
So we can use the trial to practice, is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly.
Okay, thank
because
you.
it's not about Azure credits that you need. So when we did it, it's a 500 that you're going to need Azure credits for this. you just activate the trial for environment. Just Microsoft and try the free Premium 1 or Premium 2. You're good.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Inina, you're ready? If you're not, then Solomon can ask you a question.
Good evening, sir.
I agree.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question about there's the IAM and then there's an emerging field now that's GRC. So I wanted to ask, is these certifications secure entry levels for GRC?
No. So if you're going to GRC, then you're looking at a different part of cybersecurity. GRC is a different field under cybersecurity. The way cloud security is under cybersecurity. You understand? So it's a different entirely. See, it's a different thing entirely. So it's not prerequisite or anything for GRC. Yeah, we only look at GRC on the high level. So you're not even diving deep into anything GRC at all. This is like the only time you see us mention GRC.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So I still have Greg, Goodness, and Phil hands up. Do you guys still have questions? Goodness, do you have questions? Do you still have questions? Phil, do you still have questions? And let me take the last one. Afolabi. Afolabi, you can unmute and ask a question. All right, so guys, thank you so much, everyone. Please, like I mentioned earlier, try to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, right? LinkedIn page and follow the page. And if you want to volunteer for anything at all in the community, you want to be part of the social media team, you want to be part of the website development, then conference planning team, you can reach out to any of the admin, then we'll add you to the group. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. Sorry, I had to turn my camera off because I was already tired. Looking forward to hours. I remember the last time we did that. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see you guys tomorrow again to continue the class. Have a wonderful night rest. Bye for now.